Hello and welcome to another My NT/ND marriage video. OTRS, Ongoing Traumatic Relationship Syndrome. This isn't something that I knew about until recently when I was part of the Asperger's support group. Or do you say Asperger's? What did I just say? Asperger's and Asperger's. That's really good because that's actually relevant to what I'm going to talk about today. So as I was saying, I didn't really know about it until I started going to support groups, and then I started talking to people about certain symptoms that I had noticed, and even then I didn't even know they were symptoms. It was just something I'd noticed. And somebody mentioned this as being a cause or a factor. So what had I noticed? Once we moved into the house we're in now, when hubby became super critical and everything was a problem and I couldn't do anything right and I didn't do it often enough or well enough or blah, 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 daily pickings and critiquings and fault findings and, the stress levels going through the roof. So I started to notice that I kept dropping things. That was the first kind of sign that something was amiss, but even then I didn't know that it was a sign and that something was amiss. I just kept breaking plates, dropping cups. I would be putting something away and it would just slip out of my hand. I'd be like, what? I had it. Why is it now on the floor broken in pieces everywhere? What's going on? And so it just kind of became the norm around the house that I was just dropsy. And we started buying plastic containers and plastic plates and everything plastic so that I couldn't break anything. And I had to be really careful and slow about how I did everything because I was constantly dropping and breaking and stuff. And I didn't really sort of think much of it like to begin with. It was just a plate here or something there, a chip there, But after a while it started to become sort of noticeably repetitive and obvious, but then it started to sort of become outrageous, such as me putting something away and it just would slip out of my hand. It was almost like I didn't have control over my grip anymore. And so one thing, a really classic example that really sort of started to make me wonder what was going on, was one of hubby's friends had come to visit and he was standing on the other side of the counter chatting to me while I did the dishes. So I'm washing away, do, and I get this coffee cup and I go to put it in the dish rack. It's only about a foot away from me. And I go to put it in the dish rack and it, instead of going to the dish rack, it just goes flying across the room. And I just kind of remember watching it and thinking, what the hell just happened? And even the male friend, he's like, wow, what was that? And I'm like, I know, how weird, right? And we're having a laugh about it, but at the same time, I'm thinking, that's really strange. How did I just launch a cup across the room when I was only putting it so far? And it wasn't that I'd flung it, like it put a bit of oomph into it. It just kind of was going in that direction and went that way instead. And so that was when I sort of started to think, this is maybe a bit beyond just having the dropsies and just being clumsy. Like, as I mentioned, it felt like my grip wasn't working. And I don't believe in ghosts. And it wasn't as though something was hitting my hand or anything. But sometimes it would be like some entity had grabbed it and flung it across the room because I hadn't done it myself. So that was one of the first sort of symptoms I'd noticed. But I'd also noticed that it was starting to affect my words. Hence why I said the start of this video is a very appropriate point that I made there. I will be saying one thing and thinking another, or thinking one thing and then saying another. And I get really befuddled. Like sometimes I'll have to describe something, like a pantry. I'll say, it's the thing with the shelves and the doors and stuff goes inside. And people go, oh, pantry. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's the word I'm looking for. And so I started to notice that it was affecting my words. I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't remember words properly. And I'm far too young for dementia, although it can affect young people. But it was not quite like that. It was just topsy-turvy. Lots of spoonerisms and lots of made-up words where I'd be trying to say one thing, like squirt bottle, and I'd say squattle. And woo, I've made up a new word. And this was happening a lot too. You know, I'd say squattle and then I'd laugh and then I say, I mean squirt bottle, and then everybody's kind of laughing along with me. But again, I started to notice this was happening more and more often. And when I write, it's a very similar thing. Instead of writing squirt bottle, I'll write squattle and then have to scribble it out. So a lot of my writing is just scribbles because I've not thought well about the thing that I was going to say. I sort of think one thing, say another. It's like some sort of signals up here are not getting there. And it's the same with grabbing things. My mind says, hold on to that jar, and then some part of my body goes, oh, you're there now, let it go. And I wasn't there, and I've let it go too early. And so, as I said, it wasn't until recently where I was talking to somebody about this, and they said, oh, it sounds like a symptom of trauma. And I was thinking, yeah, I suppose. I'd never really felt stressed. I mean, I knew that I was walking on eggshells and super annoyed and defensive and angry that hubby was so critical. But I never really felt, I guess, trauma or stress. But I think what was happening, whether I felt that way outwardly or not, is it was affecting me in that way anyway. I mean, I suppose this is how trauma works. You don't really kind of necessarily feel the trauma every minute of the day, but it starts to affect your every being. And so it was affecting my work. I mentioned that I got a job. I might have mentioned that I got two, and I was also volunteering at the Salvos. But it did affect my work because I couldn't remember stuff. I would say and do the wrong thing. Ridiculous. Like, I could go days and not, and then have one day where, you know, some crap had hit the fan. But I was often saying the wrong thing. To give you an example, I was working at the reception and somebody purchased something. It cost $42. There's these barcodes that we scan. I scanned the wrong one. And the boss comes up and I tell her, oops, I've scanned the wrong one. And she says, how much money was it? Difference by? I mean, even then, that's not even a sentence. Anyway, I say $42 and she goes, $42? And she's freaking out. And I laugh and say, oh, sorry, I meant the item was meant to be $42, but I scanned it out at $40, a price difference of $2. And she goes, oh, that's all right then. But she's looking at me like, what the hell? Why did you say $42? What's the matter with you? And that was just this ongoing running theme. What's the matter with you? And I was constantly doing things like, I would do something that was not so much against procedure, but not the correct procedure. And we had a rule book, like an instruction book, that showed me step by step how I meant to do everything. And I still kept forgetting to refer to the book, doing something that wasn't the correct way, and then thinking, what were you thinking? Like constantly questioning myself, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? Why? There's a book right there, it tells you how to do it. Why have you messed this up, you know? And so eventually I was let go because I was just making too many mistakes. All up, I was only there for 35 days. But it was spread out over the course of several months. Yes, and I just kept sort of cocking things up. Not often, not all the time, not sort of regularly, not every day I went in, but almost every day that I was there, I would either say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And it might even be something simple like, my eyesight's pretty bodgy at the moment and we have a makeup stand. And I'd asked one of the people there, what's that particular product? Not because I don't know much about makeup, but because I couldn't read the label. It was too small, the writing. And she turns to me and says, do you know anything about makeup? As if to say, what are you doing working here if you don't? And I was like, yeah, I do. I just couldn't read the bottle, you know, but she's still there looking at me like I'm a bit daft. And that's what I noticed was happening as well. People around me were looking at me like I was 98 cents short the dollar. And I'm not a dingbat. I'm not an unintelligent person. But I was really doing a lot of unintelligent things. And it's kind of ironic because if I compare that job to my Salvo's volunteer job and the other salon that I was working at, both of those jobs gave me incredible amounts of freedom and responsibility and trust. And I don't make mistakes half as often there as I did at this place. So there must have been something perhaps to do with I suppose the stress of it. Again, I wasn't feeling stressed. I wasn't going in every day, oh, nervous wreck, oh my God, or anything. I was going in thinking, yeah, I'm getting better, I'm getting good, I'm learning this, I'm learning that, I'm getting better at this, okay, I made that mistake, I won't make that again. But obviously there was some pressure behind the scenes that was affecting me somehow, because I am not making the same mistakes at the other jobs that I was making at this one. And so that's how that sort of trauma is affecting me. And it may affect different people differently. And as I said, it wasn't until I went to the support groups and I was talking to one of the ladies there and I was telling her how I can't English. Just everything just comes out gobbledygook, you know, and I'm like, what? I can read, I can write, what's going on? And that's when she says it sounds like ongoing trauma. And I was like, oh, is that a thing? And it is. Now, as I say that, I don't know if it's in the medical book or not. I assume it is. But yeah, it's definitely a real thing. It's definitely affecting people. It may even be something that we're just starting to sort of really notice, like PTSD and complex PTSD. We're sort of learning more about that as we go along. And so I think that they're starting to realise that that being caught in traumatic relationships obviously has these sort of effects on those who are in those relationships, which in my case is making me drop a lot of things and I can't put words together correctly. So anyway, drop a comment below. Can you relate to this? Have you heard of it before? Are you experiencing this? Is there a cure? I hope so. I mean, that's the other thing too. When I was working, I thought maybe because I'd been a stay-at-home mum for so long, although technically I work from home, but I wasn't interacting with lots of people and things, so I was kind of like forgetting how to talk, how to mingle, how to do all that kind of thing. So I was sort of thinking that if I started work, it would help. Like it would, you know how you get those funny game things you can play for people with dementia and it helps them? Well, I thought maybe going out to work would have that effect as well, that it might, you know, open up some synapses and things will start firing again and I'd get good. But evidently, I guess it affects me more than I thought it would. But now I'm just wondering if it'll go away and if it will ever be gone and I'll be normal again. I mean, I suppose that's the question. But anyway, drop a comment below and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really do appreciate it.